So welcome everyone for the last session of this FDP series that we are looking at. And so the final one that we are going to discuss today is the testing and certification background for electric vehicle. So I think people are very well knowing that the components present in the electric vehicle are of different categories, different levels. Say for example, we have the electric motor, we have a battery pack, we have a DC-DC converter, we have an inverter, we have a thermal management system, we have the battery management system, right? And we have other minor components, but very important components like contactors, relays, right, which are all coming under the safety critical component category. So there are each and every component, the present in the electric vehicle is playing a very important key role, that we need to understand that. And each and every component have their own requirements. The industry requirements are there, and specifically saying each and every component has their own standard requirements, right? So that is something which we need to understand. So this session we will be talking about various standards, regulations applicable to for each component of electric vehicle, and we also talk about the challenges for those components to challenges in designing these components to meet these regulations. Definitely, it is a challenge for the design engineers or the people who are working in the homologation side to meet all these homologation requirements, right? So this is the agenda for this particular session today. So basically, what is automotive homologation, right? So it is the process of certifying the vehicle or a particular component in the vehicle. So to meet all the regulatory bodies, I hope I would have mentioned in the earlier stage that our company is working in this particular area. So we are supporting the component manufacturer, vehicle manufacturer, in order to get the homologation type approval for their component or vehicle, right? So it is a very important aspect of electric vehicle, right? So because today we need to ensure the electric vehicles are very safe. They are safe in the customer's hand. So the customers should feel that they are riding a safe vehicle, right? So how to make sure that that is there, because that is with the help of these kind of regulations and standards and the process of meeting this regulation. That is one of the challenge for the engineers working in this particular EV domain, right? So when we look at electric vehicle completely, so we have all these components sitting inside the vehicle. So the motor, inverter, the brake system, which is going to have a regeneration braking. So obviously the regulations are there, specific regulations are there. So we have the inverter, the drive battery, the battery monitoring unit, the battery modules, DC-DC converter, onboard charger, so fast charger, right? And the operating relay contactors between these kind of battery system. So all these things, we need to understand before getting into the complete vehicle development. So one of the suggestion, whenever we talk to our customers, one of the suggestion we give them is that to introduce to inherit the homologation requirements, regulation requirements for each component during the component selection stage itself or the component sizing stage itself. So we always suggest our customer to do the same, because it is very difficult to make the modification changes and optimization. It is very difficult for them to do that same after a certain stage of development has been completed. It is very difficult. It is going to cost them a lot of time and money. So definitely we encourage our customers to think ahead, in terms of homologation side, right? And why it is required, many times people there is a big question mark about the safety of electric vehicle, right? So whenever I talk about electric vehicle, people ask me directly, Prashant, whether the electric vehicles are safer, whether they will catch fire, and whether they will catch fire normally, or what is their condition, right? What about their operating scenario, whether it is safe for the the person who is operating it or anyone nearby the vehicle, right? So all these questions, there are many blanks to be filled in this area, right? So I think this session will give you that, it will fill in some of the blanks which are available there. So if you look at the last, the available data from National Fire Protection Agency, because US and European countries, they have been using the electric vehicles for a quite longer time compared to countries like India. So we have like on the 37-year data, the last 37-year data, because we had what is a hybrid vehicles from 1994 itself. Hybrid vehicles were present in the market from Toyota and other brands. It was already in the market since 1990s itself, right? So only in India it is catching up very right now, but the market was already there existing in 1990s itself. But still, the costing and other factors, battery cost and all these things were not in optimum level that it will become a rider's choice basically. But today the battery price and all the price of the each and every component has become has reached a very good level that today it has become a choice for many of the customers. Say for example, if you take the NFPA data, National Fire Protection Agency data of USA, 1 in 1,000 vehicles catch fire in IC engine vehicles, right? 1 in 1,000 vehicles. And as per the same data, it is 1 in 20,000 vehicle. 1 in 20,000 vehicle catches fire in electric vehicle. So compared to IC engine vehicles, actually electric vehicles are much safer, and in terms of its fire and other scenarios. But if you look at just by saying this, or just by saying in this way, it may not be good, right? So this session, you will see what are all the ways that the design engineers are working, what are all the ways the product design has been done, functional safety design has been taken care in order to make it, in order to make sure that the vehicle is completely safe at any point of time. So that is what we'll be seeing now. So when we look at an electric vehicle, right, these are all the safety related concerns of any electric vehicle, or it is a hybrid vehicle. One of the main concern everyone have is shock protection. When I say electric vehicle, immediately our mind brings us to shock protection. So whether the electric vehicle will have a shock when I touch the vehicle, or when I touch the components of the vehicle. So when I touch the battery, when I touch the motor, whether it will give me electrical shock. So that is one question among general people, general public. Second is unintended vehicle movement. So because in petrol diesel vehicle, actually we need to turn on the vehicle and the engine should be turned on, then the gears should be shifted, then the vehicle will move. Here in this case, what happens is in some of the models, just pressing one ignition key, your vehicle will be in a live state. So unknowingly, a vehicle, if someone unknowingly presses the accelerator or something, it can move. And unintentional vehicle movement is also possible because it is more of a electrical electronic architecture. A very recent example is from Toyota. If you look at the news from Toyota, very recently they have recalled some hybrid cars from Toyota Prius. Some of their hybrid cars called Toyota Prius, and the problem was some of the vehicle unintentionally they moved from their parking lot. They moved from their rest position. So it is like we need to make sure when we are designing the system and looking at the functional safety requirements. In functional safety requirement, they ask all these questions: whether your vehicle will move unintentionally, is there any possibility for that, right? They will ask the design engineer to answer this question, right? And whether there is any shock protection provided, will there be a shock, electrical shock for the passenger or the driver or the passenger at any point of time? Will there be any condition? If that is the condition, what is the method you are going to undertake to prevent that? So all these questions we need to answer as per the functional safety requirements. And elimination of the potential and thermal explosive events. So basically, when we are having this electric vehicle, we very well know that the batteries have chemicals like nickel, manganese, cobalt, and so many chemicals, and all these are like including the electrolyte, right? All these are really explosive components, and if they are not properly handled, right? So how the electric vehicle will be designed to eliminate this kind of potential thermal runaway or explosive events? What are all the measures we are going to take? All these things to be considered in this testing requirements. And RESS installation, integrity and protection, means what? Rechargeable energy storage system. That is what we call it as RESS. So rechargeable energy storage system installation and protection, integrity and protection. So if we are having a battery pack mounted in an electric car, how much integrate, how much, what sort of vibration the battery pack can withstand, and if there is any crash or impact, whether the battery pack will fly out, whether the battery pack will stay in the vehicle itself or will it come out, what are the probabilities? So all these things we need to consider under this category. And then RESS, rupture resistance and toxic gas. So if there is any overcharging, undercharging, or any sort of extreme usage of the battery pack? Will there be any rupture on the battery pack? Will there be any swelling? Will there be any gases coming out of the battery pack? Any toxic gases that can kill a person? So all these things, will be considered in the testing certification requirement of electric vehicle. And finally, the low energy standing as well, right? So low energy standing in the sense it is basically, so we see that it is clearly low energy standing means it is on the energy storage. So if you look at the battery pack, if you remember the cell balancing topic that we discussed, we see that the overall balancing is very important. If the balancing is not properly done, then some of the cells will be overcharged, some of the cells will be undercharged, some of the cells will become weaker and weaker, some of the cells will become more, more powerful, right? If the weaker cells will be, the stronger cells will start consuming the weaker cells. So all these things will lead to problems associated with this. So when we are developing the test requirement for electric vehicle or as electric vehicle subsystem, either it can be a motor, battery, inverter, DC-DC converter, any subsystem or a vehicle level requirement, we need to consider all these kind of conditions. Is it clear for everyone? So these are all the different conditions that we need to consider. Obviously, there are more other conditions as well. So when we look at the standard classifications present in the electric vehicle, we need to classify that into two segments. One is vehicle level standards, component level standards. So when we look at vehicle level, we have standards in India like AIS 038, AIS 039, AIS 040, 41, 49. These are all vehicle level testing standards. And component level, we have AIS 48. This is for battery pack, and AIS 138, this is for charger, right? So these are all component level battery certification standards, and these are all vehicle level certification standards. And when we look at motor alone, then yes, this 41, they can use it for motor alone testing as well as the vehicle level, drivetrain level testing also they can utilize. So we will talk about that in detail in the coming slides. So another most important standard is the AIS 38 standard. What is this AIS 38 talking about? AIS 38 is nothing but it is the Automotive Industry Standard 038, which is equivalent to the European Standard Economic Commission of Europe ECE R100 standard. And this standard, the main scope of the standard is about the construction and functional safety requirements for L, M, N category of all electric vehicles. So basically, L, M, N means L means two-wheeler and three-wheeler, M means passenger car and light commercial vehicles, and N means trucks and buses, these segments. So for all the category of electric vehicle, this standard is common and it is very, very important, right? And this standard talks about the functional safety design aspects to be followed, construction safety requirements to be followed by the manufacturer. So all these things are specified in this standard. Let us see some of the important key requirements they have to follow. First important requirement is the protection against electric shock. So when a manufacturer is developing an electric vehicle or electric vehicle component, they need to provide protection against direct contact or indirect contact, right? So direct contact in the sense, say if there is an inverter, okay, I have my finger, so I have my finger. I will what I can do is I might try to take my finger and insert into the inverter when the vehicle is in live condition. There are chances. So if I try to insert my finger into the inverter component, or say for example, if this is the inverter, just consider this is a casing and there's a small gap here. Okay, look at this is a small gap here, and now this gap will be verified by the manufacturer, by the testing authority. So how it will be verified? They will be using this kind of probe. See, this is called protection probe. You can see this is the IP probe. We call it as IPXXD and IPXXB. There are two different IP rating requirements for the direct contact. So they will just take, this is like a finger, our human finger, right? It can fold like our human finger, and this finger-like probe, this finger-like probe will be taken and it will be inserted. They will be trying to insert that into the gaps where the high voltage line is passing. It can be the connector, it can be the casing, anywhere. When they try that, this probe should not go inside. That is the requirement, right? So that is the requirement. So the probe should not go inside. So a finger like component should not go inside the inverter. So the inverter casing should be designed, or the connector should be designed in such a way that a finger cannot enter and touch the live wire component. So if it is a component related to the passenger compartment, then IPXXD verification will be done. And if it is other areas other than passenger compartment, then it is IPXXB requirement. So IPXXB, IPXXD, the difference is IPXXB, we have this diameter, the diameter of this pin, it will be very thin, 20 mm, just 20 mm the diameter of the pin will be there. So that's such a level of diameter will be inserted. And IPXXD, it is like finger-like structure. So there will be a bigger, like our finger, the size will be there for this particular probe. So like this, the probes will be inserted, and they'll be verifying the direct contact, if there is any direct contact happening there or not. Okay, that is the condition they will check. Second thing, what else is specified in the standard is color coding. So if you are an electric vehicle manufacturer, and if your vehicle is carrying anything more than 60 voltage DC or 30 voltage AC, if your vehicle or component is coming under this category, then your vehicle is called as high voltage category. So all your component vehicle wiring we should have a color coding on the wiring. So the wiring, the cable that we use, the cable harness that we use for the motor to inverter, inverter to battery, battery to DC-DC converter, to the high voltage compressor, to the PTC heater, whatever the component which consumes the high voltage, they should be color coded with the wiring harness, plug connector, all these components should be color coded with orange, right? So that is one more requirement specified in this standard. And finally, much more important requirement, very important specification requirement given in the standard is isolation resistance. So what is meant by isolation resistance? Say, for example, now an electric car is turned on. Okay, now I'm a normal service person. I don't know anything about electric vehicle. I'm just directly going and touching the electric vehicle component or any electric vehicle live voltage system. Immediately, once I get in connection, what will happen is the system has an inbuilt resistance. Basically, system has a inbuilt resistance, should have an inbuilt resistance, that is the isolation resistance. So that what should be the minimum isolation resistance that should be maintained by a manufacturer? Either he might be a motor manufacturer, or he may be a battery system manufacturer, or the complete vehicle manufacturer. They should maintain the minimum isolation resistance specified by the standard. And how to calculate this? Very simple. It is for a DC system, it is 100 ohm per volt. And for an AC system, it is 500 ohm per volt. Say, for example, if we have a battery pack with 450 volt capacity. Now, can you people calculate the isolation resistance, minimum isolation resistance required for that particular battery pack? 450 volt battery pack, and the resistance requirement is 100 ohm per volt. Anyone, any participant, can you give the answer, please? So the isolation resistance, it is actually a 400 volt.
45 okay.
45 kilo ohm, right?
Yes.
Yes. So 45,000 ohm or 45 kilo ohm, that is the isolation resistance they have to maintain on in the battery system. And if it is a AC component, say for example an AC motor or inverter, basically AC inverter, it is actually handling both AC and DC. So worst case, it will be considered as AC system only. So it will be like 500. If it is a 400 volt AC inverter, then 400 into 500 ohm, we have something close to 2 lakh ohms. That it is almost 200,000 ohm resistance required for that particular system. So all these are the requirements, important requirements specified in this AIS 038 standard. Such an important standard in electric vehicle. So any electric vehicle design engineer should be knowing this particular thing, right? And second thing is the water effect. Many people have one more question: whether the electric vehicle, whether they can sustain water. What if it rains? What if my vehicle is outside? If it rains on the electric vehicle, will there be any problem? Right? So there is a question. So to verify that, to prove that the electric vehicles are safer with the presence of water, we have 3 tests conducted as per the standard. One is the washing test, one is the flooding test, and other one is the heavy rainstorm test. Right. So in this case, these are the different flow rate. So they will be using a nozzle like this for the washing test, and the washing test they are using this kind of nozzle, and this nozzle will spray the water at all the direction, at all the sides of the vehicle. Even the bonnet, the front bonnet will be opened, and the water will be sprayed at all the components, motor, inverter, everything. And they will verify if there any sort of isolation. So after spraying the water, once again what they will do, they will check the isolation resistance. So after the water is sprayed, before the water is sprayed, right? Before the test is connected, after test is connected, everything they will be measuring the isolation resistance, because it is the very important value to be maintained by the electric vehicle, right? So, and flooding test, they take it in a very smaller way, just a 10 centimeter depth. So I don't think this is enough, right? Because if you look at the floods in Kerala and other parts of India, right, the depth of the water is very high. So here, as per the standard, they only check 10 centimeter, right? 10 centimeter means it's very, very small. It is just a splashing of water. When they are running on a 10 centimeter depth, only the water will get splashed onto the motor component, but the motor will not completely, immerse into the water actually. But some companies, they do the test like that. Even though the standard does not specify that, the companies, they do that, especially companies involving on the two-wheeler front or on the passenger car front, and especially some of the companies, they have their internal their OEM level internal testing. There they will check all extreme level. Even they will completely immerse the vehicle into water. They will check what is happening for the vehicle, right? So all these worst case conditions, they will check it. But as per the standard, we have these 3 tests only for the electric vehicle. If that vehicle passes this test, it will be considered as passed. That is the regulation actually. And AIS 39, that is one more test. We call it as electrical energy consumption test. So basically today that problem is there, right? There is one problem in this particular area. If you remember the Tata Nexon, have anyone saw the news? Tata Nexon was Tata Nexon electric vehicle has been banned in Delhi for a temporary period of time. Have you seen that news? Anyone? Any participants? Tata Nexon. So why? Because the Tata Nexon, when you purchase Tata Nexon, they are telling that the range of the vehicle is 312 kilometers. But some of the people, who driven the vehicle in North India, they are telling that they are only getting 200, 250, not more than 250 like that. Not more than 200 also sometimes they are telling. With the AC and other driving conditions. So because of that, the Delhi government, what they did is they have stopped the subsidy. Nearly 1.5 lakh subsidy is there for Tata Nexon. So Delhi government, they have stopped the subsidy for Tata Nexon car, and they have asked Tata Motors to answer for this particular issue, right? And they very, very clearly said that, sir, the 312 kilometer range what we are given, energy consumption what we have given, that is based on the certain driving condition. If the customer is 24/7, if he is using AC, and if he is driving in a driving condition, driving behavior, all these factors can reduce the the range of the vehicle. And this is applicable for petrol diesel vehicles also, right? Petrol vehicle, when you go to the showroom, they will say 60 kilometers, and when you drive the vehicle actually on the road, you will get 35-40 kilometers, right? Examples like Activa and all these vehicles. So even this case is in petrol diesel vehicles as well, but now the issue is there. So to solve this issue only, already there are standards are there, these standards, but the problem is it is not real-time testing. What they do is, why that in showroom they are giving 60 kilometer range, and in actual condition we are getting only 30. Why that is there? Because it is on the real time we are not testing it. Basically we are running the vehicle on a dynamometer like this. See, the vehicle will be run on the dynamometer like this, and the testing will be done on the dynamometer using the Indian driving cycle. If you remember the driving cycle which I have shown yesterday, similarly we have a driving cycle, up and down, acceleration, deceleration, acceleration, deceleration behavior. So the whole vehicle, the whole electric vehicle will be run on this dynamometer in order to verify the behavior of the vehicle as per this driving cycle. So they will conduct the number of driving cycle operation. So the IDC is basically very short. It is just 108-second duration, and totally 34 times, the driving cycle will be run for a two-wheeler and three-wheeler category. So 108 into 34 means how much? It is 3,672 seconds, which means 61 minutes, almost 1 hour. Almost 1 hour they will conduct the test for a two and three-wheeler. And for buses, trucks, cars, it will be different, obviously. So after conducting the test, they will measure what is the energy consumption in watt hour, right? So for 1 hour of the test, the total amount of energy consumption will be measured using the power analyzer or any other system component, and the overall power consumption will be measured, and the distance traveled by the vehicle will be measured, E and D. So the energy consumption, electrical energy consumption of the vehicle will be calculated as E by D. So watt hour per kilometer, watt hour by kilometer. It is called the watt hour per kilometer. So in petrol diesel vehicle, we call it as kilometer per liter, right? So instead of kilometer per liter, in electric vehicle, we call it as watt hour per kilometer. So that is the specification requirement. So all these things. So if you are a manufacturer and you have, before starting the test, the testing agency will ask the manufacturer, say, what is your electrical energy consumption? So if I am a manufacturer, I will tell, say, yes, 80 watt hour per kilometer. So the testing agency, they will run the test. They will check whether they are getting the same 80 watt hour per kilometer, or if they are getting, say, for example, 85 or 90 watt hour per kilometer. They will check the deviation. If the deviation of the value is more than 4%, then it will be like declared as failed, right? It will be considered as a failed test. Once again, they will give the chance for the manufacturer to enter into the test. Before that, the manufacturer can verify all the components, and again he can come into the test. And once again, if it passes, once again, a second chance, if it passes the test, third time the test will be conducted. Only after 2 repeated pass of the test, they will be making sure the vehicle is passed on the test, right? Otherwise, it will be considered as failed on that particular standard, right? So likewise, all other standards, the AIS 40040, it is the method of measuring the range of the electric vehicle. So that is energy consumption, and this is range of the electric vehicle. In this test also same thing, the vehicle will be taken into a dynamometer, and they will be running the vehicle in steady speed of 70% of the maximum 30-minute speed, right? Say, for example, first we need to understand the conditions at which they test it, right? What they will do is, first they will measure the 30-minute speed of the vehicle. First they will ask this from the manufacturer only. They cannot decide it on the testing agency, cannot decide this on their own. Basically, they will ask the manufacturer of the vehicle, what is your maximum 30-minute speed? So now we should understand what is meant by maximum 30-minute speed. So maximum 30-minute speed means it is a speed at which the vehicle can run continuously for 30 minutes without any sort of power drop. It is a speed at which continuously it can run for 30 minutes constantly, right? So we have to take that speed, and we have to take the 70% of that 30-minute speed, and that is the speed chosen for the range of the vehicle, right? And this range test will be conducted unless the vehicle completely stops. Until that condition, the vehicle will be tested. So the vehicle might stop in many ways. One of the thing is, if the battery SOC is going below certain value, the vehicle will automatically stop. Or if there is an indicator, sometimes the battery temperature or any other fault signal rises, the vehicle will stop, right? So they will consider when the vehicle is stopping at any point of time. So if there is an indication or anything, then obviously they will consider that is the range of the vehicle. So 70% of the 30-minute speed will be the speed of the vehicle on this range test, and here they will measure the distance D directly from the dynamometer, right? So this is what the range you are getting in your dealer. When you go and visit a dealer, electric vehicle dealer, he will tell this vehicle will have 100 km per charge, 120 km per charge. Don't ever don't rely on that. Ask him, so okay, range for Arai range is 100. So actual range, how much will it go? Will it go at least 60 or 80, right? But some companies, say for example, Ather, I would definitely appreciate that company, Ather Energy. They are telling 80 as the range, and the actual is 80. In some cases, if we run the vehicle in eco mode, they are getting 90 km per charge. They are not giving false promises. They are not telling it will give 100, because their ARA range is actually more than 100. but they are not telling that to the customer. They are only telling the real mileage, 80 kilometer per charge mileage. So this, most of the companies are not doing it. Most of the companies, what they're doing, for the marketing purpose, they are telling 150 kilometer, 200 kilometer. An actual condition, when the driver takes the vehicle and drives, he is not getting that, because the dynamometer driving is different, road is different. Our roads are not like dynamometer, right? So obviously there will be difference in the range. So when we are purchasing the electric vehicle, we need to look at the real time range, the real time range. So we can call it as a real time range and real time range. So both should be compared and understood. So this particular range specified by ARA is not the real range what we get in the market, but this is the test conducted in the electric vehicle. That is mandatory. So today, the accuracy of the test depends upon the driving cycle only. So today, all the companies are actually trying to improve that, to bring the values very close to the real time. And we also have the AIS 041 test, which is nothing but method of measuring net power and maximum 30 minutes power. This is specifically for the drive unit, the electric motor, the gear train, and the differential unit, or motor alone can be used for this test. So in this test, they will calculate what is the, they will measure what is the maximum net power that the motor can deliver, what is the maximum 30 minutes power that the motor can deliver for continuously for 30 minutes. So that's the average of the power within the 30 minutes duration. So all these things are specified here on this particular standard. And they also have a standard called AIS 003, that is nothing but gradability checking. Right. So today there is one more question from the general public, whether the vehicle will be able to climb the gradient. Right. So for that purpose, we have separate test called AIS 003, where they will check the electric vehicle gradability. Minimum should be 7%. If it is greater than 1000 watt capacity motor is available there, definitely it should be having minimum 7-degree gradability performance. And how they will check it, they will check this performance with a 60% state of discharge condition. So the battery pack will be 60%, it will be discharged. Only 40% remaining power. At this time only they will check this electric, that means they check this gradability condition. So don't think that with low power they are not checking. No, they are not. They are checking at the one of the acceptable value, 60% of the state of the discharge. Obviously, with very low power, very below 20%, obviously the motor, the electric vehicle will not be, maybe depending upon the vehicle design, it may not be able to support you on the gradability side. So that is also a very important aspect we need to consider. So we should try to avoid running the vehicle at the tough conditions on its lower range, like our phone. Many times, most of the people, especially if you take me, I torture my mobile phone a lot. So I take my mobile phone, I discharge it till it dies, and I work on it. So similarly, we should not do the same for an electric vehicle, right? If we stress it too much, then obviously the battery pack will get degraded on its lifespan, right? So we should try avoiding the usage of the vehicle in such extreme SOC conditions. And one more test that is conducted on the electric vehicle is the pass by noise test. The standard number is IS 3028. It is the measurement of the pass by noise. Many people think electric vehicles are very quiet. It is not so. Depending upon the vehicle power requirement, depending upon the vehicle battery power requirement, motor power requirement, the vehicle can even create some kind of noise from the motor drivetrain, and even that is to be verified. So what they do is they keep 2 transducers, microphones on both the sides of the road. This is the test setup actually for pass by noise. So they run the vehicle at certain speed. What is the speed? They very clearly mention either 50 km per hour or 75% of the maximum design speed of the vehicle. So whichever is lower, depending upon the manufacturer input, this speed will be decided, and the vehicle will be run in the pass by noise chamber, this particular road, and the microphones will get the noise level in terms of decibel. They will measure the noise level and they will check it is meeting the requirement. So currently the requirement is like 75 decibel in the market, dBA, 75 dBA. So depending upon the market requirement for different vehicle, they will compare that and they will verify that. So why I am showing this here is to understand that there is a test connected on pass by noise as well for electric vehicles also. So IS 3028 is the standard for that. So in addition to all these, the vehicle level standards, other important standard, and one of the challenging standard I would say is the EMI EMC standard. So anyone, any of the participant, have you heard about EMI EMC and related concerns? Anything in the past? Anyone studied about or worked in the EMI EMC side? Okay, that's the one question from participant. What about electric Mahindra Electric Auto? They're offering 120. Yes, Mahindra Electric. Yes, actually their Arai range is more than 130, Mr. Sutish. But right now, the actual range, when I spoke to the drivers in Thrissur as well, I spoke to the auto drivers, the Mahindra Electric Auto drivers in Thrissur. They told me that they're getting 100 to 110 kilometer actually for every charge. And right now, I think the drivers whom I spoke, they are using this electric auto for almost 7 months since the lockdown started. Actually, last year March, almost 1 year they have completed. And when they told me that they are completely satisfied with the auto, that's what the feedback I received from the drivers.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes. So when we look at
question in the chat box.
Yes, ma'am.
I think there is another.
Okay. So he has told he heard about EMI EMC compatibility, but not work. Okay, sir. Okay. Yes. So there's a huge scope, I would say, huge scope for research and work in the EMI EMC. And definitely India has definitely very few people are working in this area. So I would also suggest this particular area to work for the electronic engineers actually. So let us understand the challenge here. So in electric vehicle, what they do is, I don't think this problem is only for electric hybrid vehicle. No, not like that. Today, petrol diesel vehicle, if you take, there are so many controllers, there are so many sensors, there are so many actuators, microcontrollers already present there in the petrol diesel vehicle, including the body control module or the climate control modules. So many electrical electronic systems are there. Whenever we have an electrical electronic system, obviously the EMI EMC issue will be there. Obviously, whenever we have a current carrying conductor, obviously this issue will come. And in electric vehicle, this issue is more because we have more amount of electrical electronic components, and not that is not the only reason, but all the components, most of the components are coming in the high voltage category. So more than 60 volt DC category or 30 volt AC category. Because of that, since they're carrying higher voltage values, there are more chances of electromagnet related interference related issues, right? That is why in the testing agencies, they have a standard called AIS 004, which is nothing but it is equal to the regulation R10, ECE R10. So this standard completely talks about gives the guidelines to test the electric vehicle about the electromagnetic emission. So what are all the different tests they conduct? These are all the different tests they conduct on the electric vehicle and electric vehicle component. Some of the tests are conducted on the full vehicle. They will take the full vehicle into the EMI EMC chamber. This is, we call it as semi-anechoic chamber, right? I think people would have heard it when you have studied about EMI EMC. So this is a semi-anechoic chamber. Inside the semi-anechoic chamber, the whole vehicle will be placed, and you can see the receiver and transmitter antenna. So it is basically emitting the radiation on the vehicle environment. And so when a vehicle level test is conducted, they will operate all the electrical and electronic component of the vehicle, starting from headlamp, tail lamp, indicator, the dashboard components. All the ECUs will be powered on, everything will be turned on, and they will see whether there is any malfunction in the presence of the radiation, right? So this is a vehicle level test, and you can see the radiated broadband emission from vehicle, radiated narrowband emission from vehicle. That means they will also check amount of radiation from the vehicle to this receiver, right? And also they will also have a transmitter which can emit some radiation, and they will check whether there is any degradation of the performance of the component present in the vehicle. So both the radiation from the vehicle is calculated, measured, as well as immunity of the vehicle to a particular radiation, electromagnetic radiation, that is also measured in this particular condition. And these three are vehicle level tests, and then we have 4 component level tests. So what they will do, they will take a complete battery pack outside of the vehicle and they will put it in the EMI EMC chamber. They will check what is the immunity of the battery pack to withstand the radiation. So can you people tell me what are all the components that you saw in the battery pack that do you think should be majorly tested for EMI EMC? Just think and answer this question. Battery pack or the battery disconnect unit, or you say just the, let me say the battery disconnect unit. Do you remember the component present on the disconnection unit of the battery? Positive, negative, there were few components between the battery and the inverter. Do you people remember that components? How many contactors were used actually in the electric vehicle in the battery disconnect unit? Relay contactors. Is there any answers coming in the chat box, or kindly put your answers in the chat box if you have anything in mind. So if you look at the battery pack, right, we have the contactors, right? The contactors and relays, they are very, very, very safety critical, because when the vehicle is operating at any point of time, if there is any short circuit happening in the vehicle, immediately this contactor should open. And imagine because of a EMI EMC issue, the contactor is not opening. It is staying closed even though there is a short circuit. What will happen? What will happen? There is a very big chance that electrical shock,
Yes.
electrical current leakage on the vehicle components, right? So the contactors are a very highly important component of the electric vehicle, and we need to definitely check whether these components are affected by EMI EMC. So this is one example I'm just taking. Similarly, safety critical components like airbag, seat belt, all these components all will be checked by the EMI EMC test. It can be component level, electrical, electronic sub-assemblies, as well as vehicle level test will be conducted. These are all the different level, the limitations they provide. What is the unit for the radiation? It is microvolts per meter. It is dB microvolts per meter. That is the unit for radiation. So in this case, the broadband emission, the radiation for this frequency. So different frequencies, the test will be conducted, and they will check what is the radiation value. So what is the microvolts per meter, and they will check whether they are meeting whether the vehicle is meeting these conditions. If they are not meeting, then obviously the vehicle will be told as like failed. Then the manufacturer has to take some measures to improve the immunity capability of the vehicle, right? So how the vehicle manufacturer can, how the testing agency decide whether this particular sub-assembly, it is not that all electrical sub-assembly will need to be tested, but the following need to be tested. Whatever the immunity related functions, for example, any electrical electronic sub-assembly that is involved in direct control of the vehicle. Can anyone give me an example for this direct control of the vehicle? Anything that controls the vehicle? Can anyone tell me any component related to this particular word? Direct, any component that is direct control of the vehicle. Basically, as a driver, what are all the controls we give for a car, for a vehicle? As a driver,
steering, brake,
very good. Steering, braking, okay. Acceleration, correct, right? So we have an accelerator pedal position sensor. We have a brake pedal position sensor. We have a steering rotational sensor. So obviously these three sensors are critical components, right? Because even though the driver is pressing the accelerator, today it is the sensor which is actually giving the inputs to the controller. If the sensor is giving a wrong input to the controller, immediately the system will fail. It is going to be a very big danger for the vehicle, for the passenger. So the direct control, whatever the components which is related to direct control of the vehicle, that will be there. That will be included in the EMI-EMC test. Okay. Then protection of driver, any component which is actually involved in protection of driver, passenger, and other road user. Okay. Any example in this section?
Seat belt.
Seat belt, very good, very good. Then airbag, very good. So these components are coming under this section. So yes, it is tested under the EMI-EMC requirement. And third one, systems when disturbed cause confusion to the driver or other road users. Any example?
Headlights and signals.
Very good. Best example is the indicator. Say if the driver is putting the left indicator, switching the left indicator, but actually the right indicator is working. So the person who is coming from the backside, the driver who is running the vehicle on the backside, he will get confused whether this vehicle is turning left or right. So he will he will imagine, he will consider that the vehicle is turning right, but the driver is actually going to turn left. So it is definitely going to cause an accident. So even if this kind of situations will come, if there is a EMI-EMC related concern is there. And vehicle data bus functionality, it is much more important, because if you look at the CAN, if you look at the crash airbag and all these systems, they are all completely dependent upon the CAN communication, right, the protocol. So if the data bus of the CAN bus protocol itself has some issue and they are very sensitive to the EMI-EMC environment, obviously that should also be tested. And systems when disturbed affect the vehicle's statutory data. One of the best example is the vehicle's movement. The systems which create the problem to the vehicle movement, unintentional vehicle movement, all these things. And the controllers, whatever the controller which is actually getting the data of the vehicle, all these things come inside this category. So if we have totally 7 to 8 ECUs are there, all the ECUs will be, electronic subassemblies will be immunity tested, EMI-EMC tested for all these conditions. So the broadband electromagnetic emission interference generated by subassembly vehicle level. So all these things will be tested, right? So if, for example, if the manufacturer has failed in the test, how to recover, how to solve this issue, right? There are multiple ways to solve the EMI-EMC problem. One of the best way is actually to provide proper shielding, right? So if the vehicle manufacturer or he is a component manufacturer, they have to provide proper shielding on the electric vehicle. Do you remember the shielding provided on the cable, the high voltage cable which I shown on the first day? The braided shield provided on the conductor above the insulator, right? So that kind of braided shield is one of an example of EMI shielding. So not only for the cable wiring harness, even for each and every component, inverter, converter, all these components, they should use an optimal enclosure design. So the enclosure design should be in such a way that they absorb, they will not allow the EMI-EMC radiations to go outside, right? Sometimes better component integration is more important. Sometimes, if I keep one component and other component very close together, right? So this component will affect the other component. So because of this particular component, the component A, if it is not having proper immunity, it might get affected by the component B. And if the component B is not having the immunity, it will get affected by the component A, which is nearby. So component integration. So now can you tell me the problem associated, any example problems will come, because we talked about power density, E-axle, all these things. So can you give an example of this component integration based EMI issue, where it will come, where can we expect this? Any example? Any example from participants? Where do you think, so if some components are integrated, there will be EMI-EMC problems might be there? Any example? So what about the integration of motor and inverter? Do you remember when I talked about the motor inverter, I also included one more component. I talked about the sensors, right? The motor speed sensor, position sensor. So this is like a component integration, right? Bringing the sensor unit, bringing the resolver, the sensor resolver unit into the motor, close to the motor casing, right? All these things, create EMI. There are chances that they can create the EMI ESC issues. So obviously, when we are integrating some of the components like motor integrated with inverter, or resolver or sensor integrated with motor, or sensors placed inside the inverter, sensors placed inside the DC near the DC link capacitor, sensors placed near the DC-DC converter. So all these things are component integration. So when we have a component integration like this, we have to make sure they are also meeting the EMI EMC requirements. And we also should ensure, the manufacturer should ensure a very good wiring harness practice. That is much more important. Most of the time, as per our testing experience, we have seen that wiring harness, many startup companies, two-wheeler, three-wheeler startup companies, they are not properly doing the wiring harness. Even as I can say, other than the OEMs, the original manufacturing equipment manufacturers like Tata Motors, Mahindra, all these companies, startup companies, they are lagging on proper wiring harness practices, right? So a very good wiring harness practice is very important to ensure the EMI EMC test will be passed by the vehicle. And finally, usage of the insulation materials. If some cases, since some of the components, if we are not able to reduce the emission, EMI radiation from the system, then one more other way is to reduce the insulation material. If there is no time available for the vehicle, for our development team to reduce the EMI radiation, then obviously one more other application is usage of the insulation materials. So they can apply the insulation materials into the casing, into the system environment, and they can reduce the EMI radiation coming out of the component. And finally, as I told, we suggest our customers to look at the compliance verification of each component at each product development stage itself. That is very important. So many times, some of the companies, they develop the whole charger and then they go for EMI EMC verification testing and all. Definitely, that is not going to help them. So as a component design team, component development team, they have to ensure that they include the EMI EMC requirements from the design stage, earlier stage itself, so that they will not have any issue at the future, at the completion stage, right? That is more important. So these are all the methods, they can avoid the EMI EMC related issues. And some of the other tests that they can conduct additionally is the BMS functionality test. So they can check external short circuit, over voltage. That means pack level, battery pack, battery cell, they do the separate tests, but they will also check the BMS, whether the BMS is functioning properly at these kind of extreme conditions of the battery pack. So that is also being applied for the battery pack environment, right? That is to be noted down here. So when we look at the battery pack, we have the cell module, the pouch, different types of cell approaches there, right? Depending upon the requirement. So when you look at this pack, the overall battery pack, we have the enclosure, right? Upper cover, lower cover, all these things should be tested. Enclosure design, enclosure testing, module testing, BMS testing, everything is there. We'll talk about that one by one. One of the first requirement is the US ABC, United States Advanced Battery Consortium. So that is the consortium which has developed the test requirements for battery packs of electric vehicles global level, especially in US. All the testing agencies, they follow this US ABC standard. So this standard includes nearly 3, 6, 7, 10, 14, 17, 19, almost 20 tests for the battery, electric vehicle battery. So nearly 7 tests for the mechanical abuse, and nearly 7 tests for thermal abuse, and nearly 5 tests for the electrical abuse. So all these tests are conducted by by these testing agencies, and they make sure that the vehicle gets passed, the components get passed in this. So for the battery, for example, in India, we have a test standard called AIS 048, Automotive Industry Standard 048. In this test, they do the following test, basically, in this regulation: short circuit test, overcharge test, shock test, means mechanical shock, it is not electrical shock, mechanical shock test, vibration test, and nail penetration test. So they'll take the lithium cell from the manufacturer and they will do short circuit. They'll connect the positive and negative side of the battery as a short circuit, and they will check whether there is any physical damage on the battery cell, whether there is any melting, whether there is any fire explosion. If anything, any one of these things happens in this cell will be considered as failed in the test, right? So the battery manufacturer, they have to design the battery and develop the battery in such a way that it will pass these conditions. So short circuit, they will do overcharging. They will keep on charging the battery for more than 24 hours, and they will check whether the battery is exploding, whether the battery is melting, all these conditions, right? That is the overcharge test, right? And shock test, they will take the battery pack, they will take the battery pack or cell onto a vibration or shock chamber. They will lift the battery pack, they will lift the battery pack to a certain height, and they will drop the battery pack, right, with the basement itself. So immediately the way the battery pack will come and hit certain area, and there will be a shock created on the battery pack. And this test will be conducted on all three different axes: x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis, and at different g amplitude will be applied on this shock test. And after this shock test, what they will do, after the shock test is conducted, they will once again do discharge process, and they will check whether the battery is discharging its normal capacity as usual after the shock test. And what is that this shock test is actually simulating? What is this shock test is actually simulating? It is our road conditions, right? Our road conditions are like that. Our road conditions are in such a way that we have to, we are going to create lot of movement on the battery pack, right? So this shock test makes sure that the battery does not lose its capability, its capacity, energy capacity, even though there is a lot of vibration and shock. So that is why this vibration test and shock test both are like physical level. Physically, they'll be testing it, right? So after conducting the test, they will check the battery rated capacity, and the battery rated capacity should not go below more than 10%. Drop 10% drop should not be there. More than 10% drop should not be there in the battery capacity. And finally, nail penetration test. On that day, I have shown you the video of the nail penetration test. So they will take a sharp nail of certain diameter specified in the standard, and they will puncture the cell directly using the nail, and at a rate of 8 centimeters per second. And after the puncture, they will check whether there is any melting of component, fire explosion happening. Physical damage, it will happen definitely because the nail is penetrating inside, but they will check the melting and fire explosion of the battery. If that is not happening, anything is not happening, then the battery cell will be considered as passed in the test. So these are all different cell level tests conducted in the system, right? And finally, a very important test that is conducted on the electric vehicle is the crash safety requirement. Crash safety requirement, because there is a huge question among the public, whether the electric vehicles will be safe in terms of a crash. So if there is a crash or an accident, right? So will there be any, what will be the outcome? What will be the behavior of the system, right? So let us understand that. So when you look at the electric vehicle crash safety requirement, right? So we have AIS 098. We call it as frontal crash requirement, and AIS 099 we call it as lateral collision crash requirement, and we have the rear end crash ECE R32 standard for rear end crash, and these are all crash standards for the EV application. And finally, we also have a standard called FMVSS 305. That means Federal Motor Vehicle Standard Safety Standard. Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard 305. In this test, what they will do is they will crash the electric vehicle, and they will check whether there is any leakage of electrolyte from the battery pack, right? All these things will be verified in this 305 standard. We'll talk about that. So these are all the different standard names, numbers for the electric vehicle application. So let us look at this example. See, this is a test conducted on an electric vehicle named BMW i3, right? So look at this vehicle. In this case, what is the difference in this crash? Can you people identify it? In this crash test, what they have done? Is it a frontal crash, or is it a?
It is on both sides simultaneously.
Yes. So we are having a combination. So this is a case of combination of both frontal crash as well as rear impact crash. But the condition is, what they have done here is, first the vehicle is actually having a rear crash. Okay, first the vehicle is standing here and it is having first the rear crash. Once the rear crash is done, after the rear crash, because of that force exerted on the vehicle goes and hits the frontal vehicle. So this is nothing but simulating a highway accident, right? In a highway, if an accident happens, this is what will happen. Initially, the rear crash will happen. Immediately, the vehicle will go and hit the frontal vehicle. So there will be two types of force acting on the vehicle. So in this case, how the vehicle will be operate, how the vehicle will behave, that is what we are going to see. So the first important requirement, as per the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard 305, after this test, one of the very important requirement is the vehicle voltage, the battery voltage. Look at this graph. Look at this graph, participants. Once the crash happens, right? Once this crash happened, immediately within 15 milliseconds, the airbag starts operating. Airbag starts operating within 15 milliseconds. And within a span of 280 milliseconds, the high voltage present in the battery starts coming down, starts dissipating. And now can you tell me what are the components involved in this operation? You can look at this picture here very clearly, that with the 280 milliseconds after the crash started, after the crash happened, the high voltage of the battery starts coming down, and within a span of 280 to 1180 millisecond, means almost 900 millisecond. Within a span of 900 millisecond, the voltage goes below 60 voltage. And why it is 60 voltage? I think you know the answer. I think the participants know the answer. Why they have to go below 60 voltage within a stipulated time?
Safety, electric short circuits.
Yes. So because we know that it is the high voltage area. It is the high voltage threshold value. So as per the standard, as per the rule specified by FM, Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard, the voltage of the vehicle should go to below 60 voltage within a short span of time. And now who is going to do this operation? What component is going to do this operation? Do you remember a resistor sitting there in the way? Do you remember a resistor sitting there in the battery disconnect unit? Have you? Do you people remember the resistor?
Resistor bank.
Yes. So there will be a resistor connected with the pre-charge contactor. So basically, that resistor will dissipate this energy in a very faster way from the capacitor and the whole, because the capacitor that we use, the DC link capacitor, that will also be having the energy. So that energy will also be dissipated very quickly. So overall, the system voltage will be brought down immediately by the system. And at the same time, once immediately the crash happens, what will happen is the battery internal circuit, the battery will get internally the fuse will blow out. So the battery will be internally disconnected. So there will be no battery output itself. Can you understand that? The battery output itself will stop, will get disconnected internally because there is an accident. So there will be no positive, negative output voltage coming from the battery system itself. And this energy, whatever stored, we are dissipating, and that is the capacitor bank. The energy stored in the capacitor bank, which will be dissipated from 300, 400 voltage DC to below 60 voltage. And all this operation should happen in a lightning speed. It's such a very high speed operation. And who is making sure this function? Do you remember the relay contactor?
Sensors.
Yeah, sensors, they give the signal. They can't do this voltage operation, right? They are just giving the signals. But actually, what are the components involved in dissipating the voltage? It is the resistor. First thing is the resistor. And basically, how the resistor is connected, it is the contactor. So the contactor should open, the circuit should open immediately, right? The circuit should open immediately. They should not remain closed in that case, because after the crash, what are the chances? There are many situations might come. The electric cable, the electric voltage, high voltage cable may get cut, may get damaged, or the battery pack may get leak into the passenger compartment. There are many chances. So the battery voltage should be brought immediately to a zero value or a below 60 voltage value within a short span of time. One of the main components supporting this work is the contactor. One of the main other component is the resistor. So all these things make sure that, right? Actually, in our high voltage vehicle expert training, we talk about these particular aspects in detail. You know, that's why it is called as a level 2 training, expert level 2 training. So those trainings, you know, generally it is required for a design engineer or a professional to attend such level 2 training, basically to come into this domain. So all these things followed in the crash requirement standard, right? The AIS 09899, ECE R32, and FMVSS 305. All these standards are coming under this category. So that's all the requirement of, you know, the vehicle level requirements. So this is the safety level requirement. So after the crash, post the crash, what they will check? After the crash is completed, crash test is completed, what they will check? They will check what is the amount of liquid. So there should not be any liquid more than 5 liters, except the coolant from the battery pack should spill outside the passenger compartment. That is first thing. Second thing, there should be no visible trace of liquid except the coolant from the battery pack within 30 minutes after the barrier impact test. So all these are actually examples that consideration they have to follow, regulation they have to follow. And after the crash is conducted, they will once again check what? They will check the isolation resistance. And I think you people know how to calculate it. So they will check whether that minimum isolation resistance of certain ohms is maintained or not. And they will check whether the voltage drop on the DC high voltage bus line, it should be below 60 voltage. And if using in the AC high voltage bus line, they will check whether it is below 30 voltage. So all these are checked, verified after the crash test is done on the electric vehicle. Is it clear for all the participants? Is it clear? Is there any questions? Feel free to ask me here. Is there any questions from the participants related to the testing?
What are the safety requirements if EVs fell into water?
Fell into?
Water.
Okay.
A lake.
Say,
Yeah.
Yes. Say once, so immediately say once a vehicle comes in contact directly with the water, right? So coming into contact with water is not an issue, but immediately once the system, any battery system or motor, anything that comes in contact with motor, if there is any current leakage, you know, if there is any leakage current, even a small milliampere leakage current happens from any one of the component, any one of the high voltage component to the water, right? That leakage current will be measured by the insulation monitoring system, isolation monitoring system present in the vehicle. So we call it as pilot monitoring system present in the isolation unit. So this unit will keep on watching like a sensor. It keeps on watching the leakage current in the system. Whenever the water comes in contact with the vehicle, it will not immediately create any issue, but only if there is any leakage current, if the water enters into the cable wiring harness, and then if there is any leakage current, immediately the system will indicate the high voltage isolation resistance lost. The signal will come to the driver, and immediately the battery, the battery fuse will blow out. Since the battery fuse will blow out, the battery will be disconnected. So there will be no power supply from the battery to the other component. So no need to worry about electrical shock or any leakage current to the system. Is it clear?
So that means it is not safe to run this vehicle on the water bodies, right? I mean, see, in the situations where we have a lot of water,
so we can run the water actually into the water, you know. But what I meant is, it is actually completely immersed in a very high level of water content, right? But definitely you can drive the vehicle onto the water, because these battery pack, all these vehicles have IP67 rating. Especially more in the passenger vehicles and all, passenger vehicle cars and all, they have IP67 rating, which is like waterproof. It is already provided for all the components. So you don't need to worry about the water entering into these components very easily. But if you keep the water, that means if you keep the vehicle continuously on the water more than 1-2 hours, in that case, yes, definitely the water might enter into the wiring harness or anything. But if you are just running on the vehicle, on the road, if there is a water, even though the depth is like more than our leg or hip, the vehicle runs on that, no issues will be there. There will be no issues. Only if the vehicle stays inside the water area for more than 1 hour, then only the issue will be there.
All right.
Yes. So is there any other questions from the participants? Say this is one example, say one of the crash tests for the battery pack alone.
Sir, this vehicle will be on the charging side. There will be any surge protection devices?
Obviously, sir, it will be there both on the vehicle side as well as the charger side also. Surge protection devices will be there. So it will be completely monitoring the power flow of the system. So if there is any unintentional or undisturbed power flow, automatically the BMS itself will disconnect the chargers. Even though the charger is staying connected with the vehicle, the BMS will internally disconnect the charger from the vehicle. So there won't be any issues actually. Obviously, it will be there. Surge protection devices will be there. Say, look at this case, a battery pack, they are taking the whole battery pack to such an altitude and they are going to drop the battery pack. So battery impact test, there are many level of battery impact tests done. Battery fire test is done. They will take the battery into a fire zone and they will completely try to burn this battery pack, but the battery pack will not catch fire. It is like for a stipulated time period, they will show the battery pack to the fire. So all these conditions, the battery should pass. So that's how the vehicles are being tested basically. So I'm pretty sure I'm really concerned about India, because in India we have the issue, bringing this proper safety condition in India, but other European countries in other standards, they are actually properly testing the vehicles basically, right? So one more example, let me show you for the crash testing facility, and this would give a better idea. So this is basically a frontal crash test. So a frontal crash test at 64 km/h. So when we have internal drive components, so everything they need to make sure, they are having the isolation resistance. So on the frontal impact side, this is the side impact. They do conduct the AIS standard as per the standard EC standard. So in this case, in this kind of situation, the battery pack which we are placing in the driver compartment, below the driver compartment, right, the passenger compartment, we should make sure the battery pack has strong structure so that it can withstand this kind of side impact. So that's why most of the time the battery pack is placed very close to the bottom. You see this particular area. And finally, we have the rollover test as well. So these kind of rollover tests will also be conducted depending upon the vehicle performance requirement, but actually in the safety critical test it is there. So rollover test, especially in the NCAP certification, they do have the rollover test as well. So depending upon the requirements as specified in the regulation, the vehicles has to definitely meet all these electrolyte spillage requirement or shock resistance requirement, all the ways, voltage drop requirement, everything will be verified. And all these things are actually performed by electrical, electronic, mechatronic, instrumentation engineers, and some areas we have the mechanical and automotive engineers. So there is a huge job market even in this particular area as well. So if there are any students, for them, I'm just telling them. So this is also another area where if you have a good amount of even one of the in our company also, we also work in these areas only. So we work on the homologation requirements only. So when we have a customer, we take the homologation requirement for the particular vehicle, either it is a two-wheeler, three-wheeler, whatever the vehicle, and we do that just help them to meet that regulation. We do help them the design of the vehicle to meet all the regulatory requirements. So that's the sort of work we do, right? So so it's definitely an interesting field. Testing, certification, homologation, it's a very interesting field. I hope this session has given you some sort of information about the challenges in this particular area, right? So as a research scholar, basically you can work on all these areas where measuring the voltage, bringing down the system voltage to a level, and you can find a better methodology to bring down the to improve the isolation resistance, or to improve the voltage reduction potential. All these things are the ways where we can work, improve the areas. So that's all about that final session of today. So if there are any questions from the participants, kindly just give your questions. I'll be happy to answer you.
Sir,
Yes, Mr. Sudesh.
sir, I have a general question.
Yes.
Suppose we are having a ordinary car like petrol car or diesel car. We can put petrol 40 to 50 liters.
Okay.
By using that 40 to 50 liters, if the vehicle is having an average mileage of 20 kilometers, we can ride up to 1,000 kilometers.
Yes. Okay.
But in the case of electric vehicles, the maximum range they are right now, what they are providing is up to 300 kilometers or like that only.
That means in India, you're telling.
Yes. Suppose we want to go from Calicut to Trivandrum or Calicut to Bangalore, it will be more than 500 or 600 kilometers.
Okay.
So in that case, battery will drain out after riding 300 or 200 kilometers. Then again we have to charge it. We have to charge it. We have to wait for 3 to 4 hours. Is there any research really going on in this?
No, you don't need to wait for 3 to 4 hours. Actually, they have the fast charging stations already installed. Many areas. It is coming up. Moreover, say right now, if you consider India is in a very, very preliminary stage right now. It is at the stage where China was there 10 years back. 10 years back, China was at this stage actually, where the electric cars were just starting in the market. Right now in India, you see two-wheeler, three-wheeler market is already grown. The sales is already 300% increase compared to last year. So two and three-wheeler segment already it is going. I think you would have seen the electric Mahindra autos running in Kerala already, right?
Yes.
So, but the passenger car segment, as you told, the range problem is there, because of which today the fast chargers are available even in Kerala at different highway locations and different hotels. We are already started placing the fast charger, and these fast chargers will take 45 minutes to 80% charging. So 45 minutes, it is like having a lunch or a coffee time or lunch time. In this time you can 80%, 85% charge the battery completely. So that is what the current situation available. But in future, as I told, currently I just talked about battery specifically. I did not say only lithium battery going to be used. No. Today the solid state batteries are coming into the market. So this solid state battery technology, they are like much faster they can charge compared to the conventional lithium ion battery. So you will be seeing in the future that the conventional normal charging itself will happen in 1 hour, and fast charging will happen in 10 minutes, 5 minutes, like that. So very near future it is going to be there, and already it all depends upon the switching devices, semiconductor devices, the power electronics technology only, right? So all these devices are already they are able to function properly. So today they are using different silicon carbide, gallium nitride semiconductors. All these advancements are nothing but going to improve. But if you take India's condition today, the electric car market in India, most of the components, almost 90% of the passenger car components are actually imported from China, Korea. So unless we develop the internal components in India, still there will be challenges. But the two-wheeler market, three-wheeler market, already the most of the components are manufactured in India. A motor, battery, other than the motor controller, motor is developed in India, battery pack is built in India, but the cells are coming from abroad. So, but the companies like Godi Energy, there is a company called Godi, G-O-D-I, Godi Energy in Gujarat. They are developing battery cell plant. Very soon there will be a very huge giga factory coming up in Gujarat under the leadership of the Prime Minister. He is planning it for the Gujarat area. So I think very soon there are many things happening, and there is no more question, right now there is no more question that electrification is going to come, because already companies like Volkswagen, companies like Jaguar, and the Volkswagen, one of the largest manufacturer in the world, right? Toyota, Volkswagen, all these companies already they have announced that from 2030 they are going to start. In 2025 itself, they are going to stop the diesel models, and after 2025 they are going to only have petrol model and electric model, and after 2035 they are going to have only electric model. And especially some of the countries like European countries like Germany, France, Italy, all these countries already they have put a timeline that by 2025, 2030 there will be pure electric vehicle only will be allowed in the market. So all these things are the driving forces basically. The range charge requirement, definitely it will be solved for the passenger cars and other segments using the fast charger concept. And I think I don't know whether I shown you the fast charger specification. So you can go to the companies like ABB. Just type company name ABB. Let me show the model name ABB fast charger. There are fast chargers available in the market, which I told half an hour charging, 45 minutes charging. See, this is an example of that charger. So for the fast charger basically, right? So these fast chargers can charge the complete vehicle within like 15 minutes. See, Teraf 94. This is like 25 minutes to 15 minutes for 100-kilometer range.
Okay.
So there are many new advancements happening in the fast charger. So I think 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes is not a big deal, right? They can have a cup of coffee and come back to the vehicle. So if it is giving 100-kilometer additional range for every 15 minutes of charging, it is acceptable, at least at this point of time. Definitely people will say, no, we want everything in seconds, right? Like a petrol filling, if you need to have a electricity backup, in your battery, then battery swapping stations will be there. So already companies like companies
like LPG cylinder, we are giving the LPG cylinder and taking the refilled cylinder back.
Correct. So there are companies like Sun Mobility, a company named Sun Mobility based out in Bangalore. Already they are having the battery swapping technology, and already they have partnered with some of the manufacturer like Piaggio vehicles and all. They have partnered. So they are going to introduce the swapping technology model for them. So yes, end of the day, technology, there will be multiple technology will be there in the market, but it is the customer who is going to decide which one they are going to prefer, right? Let us see in the coming future days. Let us see how the market is going to evolve in India. So there is a huge potential. India is having a huge potential market. Let us see how it is going to evolve. So we are
so this sir, just for your information, now also you can have there are enough charging stations across Kerala. Just Google it.
Yes, that's very good, sir. That very clearly mentioned across Kerala, because compared to all other states, in my opinion, Kerala is the only state which has taken a lot of measure to give subsidy for electric vehicle or to place the charging station properly in different places. Already in Cochin, there are different places they have placed the charging station. Even in Thrissur, see, Thrissur is a normal, compared to Cochin, it's a normal place, it's not a high city basically. So, but still for Thrissur also, they have placed the charging station at 2-3 locations. So yes, Kerala government is definitely doing a fantastic job compared to states like Tamil Nadu and other states.
And sir, I have a query. Is it possible to retrofit like a petrol car with a
yeah, we can retrofit, sir. Already, if anyone interested for such business, let me know. Directly contact me. I have the ready retrofit kit, approved kit, because we cannot directly fix any kit directly. It has to be approved. The kit has to be approved as per AIS 123 Part 3 standard. So any manufacturer who got approval with the AIS 123 Part 3 standard, they can actually, they are actually legally, they can fit the kit. And one of the example is like a CNG LPG kit. You can use similarly, you can have a retrofit kit. And there are already 2 companies which have got approval. One is from Pondicherry and one is from Hyderabad. So if you want to any support in that area, let us know. You can become a distributor, because these companies, they are looking for state level, district level distributors throughout India. So if anyone looking for such business, you can approach me. I can provide you information about that. And if you want to just, if you want to directly take approval, yes, that is also possible. Just you need to spend money for the certification process, sourcing all these components from the vehicle. Battery, basically a kit: motor, motor inverter, DC-DC converter, battery pack, and wiring harness. All this thing is called a kit. So this kit can be fitted for a vehicle. So right now, as per my knowledge, the kit cost for a three-wheeler auto is 1,50,000 to 70,000. 1,50,000 to 1,70,000. This is the price of a kit for an electric auto. So if they bring an old electric auto, we can fit this kit in that petrol auto, and we can convert that into electric vehicle, and we can re-register the auto completely newly with a new green number plate from the registering authority. So that's the procedure.
Sir, I'm asking for small cars like a Maruti.
Yes, even same standard is applicable for car, bus, anything. AIS 123 Part 3 standard. So if you are thinking to develop such a kit, you have to follow the standard specified in the regulations specified in the AIS 123. The tests are going to be the same EMI/EMC test, same motor power test, range test, everything going to be same, sir, actually. Either for car or bus or a truck, the tests are going to be same. Is it clear, sir? Is it clear, sir? Is my answer was clear to you? So this is the contact number. So
yes,
feel
sir.
free to reach the contact number here at any point of time. If you have any questions, queries related to electric or autonomous mobility or general automotive domain in concern generally. So these are the contact details. So feel free to reach us and try to get in touch with me in LinkedIn as well. If you're there in LinkedIn, search for Prashant Kumar Palani. You will be able to get my name in LinkedIn. So feel free to get in touch with me for any sort of support or collaboration. As I mentioned, our company is also supporting for Center of Excellence development, laboratory development for institutions. So if in such case requirements, feel free to reach us. We are already given our proposals to institutions like Rajagiri institutions and many institutions in Kerala, in other institutions in Tamil Nadu as well. So if such requirements are there, feel free to reach us. No problem, we can support. So that's all about the session. So yes, any more question?
Sir, regarding that charger, fast charging technology.
Okay.
So you have been telling that now different manufacturers will be using different batteries, right?
Yes.
Battery packs.
Yes.
So is all the battery packs will have the same charging standards?
Battery pack or battery charger, you're telling?
Battery chargers, maybe different batteries will have different charger methodology,
yes.
Constant voltage,
yes.
constant current, or the current rating, or the
yes.
voltage specification kind of thing.
Correct.
So can I charge my vehicle to any kind of fast charger, or it should have a specification like the ABB, it has to be charged from the ABB charger, or it has to be charged from a particular manufacturer's charger?
Okay. So if you remember the charging related standard, I think I already showcased that previous few days back. Same thing is applicable here. So if you look at when you purchase a vehicle, when you purchase a car, in that electric car, they'll mention this car is compatible for CHAdeMO charger, CCS charger. Right, so they will clearly mention that. So you have to use any charging. It can be from Delta Electronics, it can be from ABB, it can be from Mastech, any charging company. But the compatible connector, the compatible connector should be used, CHAdeMO connector or the CCS connector. So this is the difference. Only the connector is different. At the same time, all the chargers, they follow the IEC regulation. That is common. So you don't need to worry about when you insert the charger, immediately it will detect whether it is a lithium-ion battery or it is a lithium polymer battery, lithium ferrophosphate battery, or lithium titanate battery. All these things that will be identified by the charger itself. It has the electronics inside there for that, right? But the amount of current that will be, say, for example, Tesla Model S, the amount of current requirement will be different, and for Chevrolet Bolt, the current requirement will be different. So the charger has the communication protocol. I think I have explained it in the charging communication, right? It will communicate with the vehicle and it will decide whether that is the amount of current required. But all the chargers will be definitely compatible with that. Chargers available in the market, most of the chargers will be compatible. So the ChargeMO or CCS, even the ABB, ABB charger that they have in the market, for the same charger, they have 3 plugs. One is conventional plug, like normal plug, they call it as a normal type 2 plug, and they also have a ChargeMO plug, and they also have a CCS plug, that means European plug. All the 3 plugs, you can see the 3 plugs are there in the charger model. So depending upon charger, they do have the couplers are different. Basically, see here also you can see 2 different couplers are provided. So one is CCS, one is ChargeMO, and AC plug. Third one is AC plug. So depending upon that, you need to you have to first identify whether you have the matching coupler. If the coupler is matching, then yes, you can charge it. Okay. Everything else, the charger is intelligent enough to decide the amount of current, voltage, everything.
So is it possible to charge from home?
Yeah, in home you can use the normal type 2, normal slow circuit. Normal our home plug can be used, but that is only type 2. It's a type 1 charger which is very slow. It will take nearly 10 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours to charge your battery. I think overnight charging is possible. When you are sleeping, you can put your vehicle for charging in your home, but it will take time since it is 15 ampere current, right? Very small amount of current coming at our home. We can charge it. There is no problem. We can charge it because when you purchase the electric car, they will provide you home charger, fast charger, both the things. So if you want to use the fast charger, you can use the fast charger anywhere in the apartment, all the places. You can use the home charger provided by the manufacturer.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Normally, home charger is coming with 8 kilowatt capacity.
Yeah, it will vary.
8 kilowatt and 5 kilowatt.
So yeah, you can consider like a 3 kilowatt, for example, 3.3, 6.6 kilowatt, 8 kilowatt. End of the day, the current rating is going to be around 15-20 ampere only, sir. Actually, so it will be like around 4 kilowatt. Starting from 4 kilowatt, it is there till different. If it is more than 4 kilowatt, then you need to make some additional precaution requirements. The requirements for your circuit board. So if it is less than 4 kilowatt, then 4 kilowatt charger, it is like our home appliance, like our iron box and other appliance. If it is more than 4 kilowatt, then additional circuit breaker, additional components you need to provide for the charging station at your home.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So I think there is a session, what is a validatory session is there. So if there are no more questions, yes, I'm giving over to Aparna ma'am. I hope the overall, the 5 days I was able to give you, because the time is very limited, one and a half hour each session. So each and every session itself is a very big topic. So if you allow me to explain, I will keep on explaining. There are so much of things we can explain here. But so I think in future we will talk. We will get opportunity to connect with you people more, with more students and faculties. I'll be happy to support on that aspect. So thank you all for actively, engaging with the complete session, hearing me, giving me enough time to showcase my presentation and skills. So thanks a lot. Thanks once again for the College of Engineering Kidangur team, and thank you Aparna ma'am, thank you Prasita ma'am, and thank you Adil sir, who has actually, I think we have signed MOU at College of Engineering Aranmula when he was working there. So I thank Adil sir, who has brought the connection with Kidangur Institute as well. So thank you all for this active support. Thank you. And over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. So this was the last session of the day. Now I'd like to invite some participants to provide their feedback.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Myself, Lalji Gopi, I am working at GC Thrissur. So, first of all, I take this opportunity to congratulate both the presenter as well as organizers. Why? Because this was a wonderful program as far as I am concerned. Prashant sir has been trying to explain so many things, from the system architecture through design, modeling, and till the final testing. So the person who have a hands-on experience or a kind of involved experience only can give such a beautiful presentation, as well as in-depth information regarding this thing. As far as I am concerned, this was one of the best presentation I have attended regarding the electric vehicle application, because he has started with the architecture. So those who have no idea about the electric vehicle can understand what it is, and slowly explained something about the design of even what kind of motors are used, how the charge DC, inverter system, drive system, regenerative braking, battery packs, thermal management, and so on. Even how it is modeled and how it is simulated using MATLAB kind of environment, and how it is tested. So these are the different areas where an electrical engineer should concentrate and can do potential research. So as a faculty as well as a researcher, I hope that this was a wonderful session. It has opened up a lot of research areas, research topics. Specifically, something can be done even in institute laboratories, like battery management, voltage balancing, drive system, chargers, and so many small things even. So on behalf of all participants, I take this opportunity to thank you, Prashant sir, and as well as I would like to congratulate the organizers and thank the organizers. And one of the additional point I want to mention is the time duration you have managed. I think Aparna ma'am was very much particular about the starting time. Ma'am was very conscious about the time. At 9:30 a.m. itself, she was mentioning, sir, we can start even if the whole participants were not joined. She was very particular about the timings, and I congratulate that, and I liked it very much. So on behalf of all participants, I thank all of you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lalji sir. Anyone else?
Hello, am I audible?
Hello everyone, I am Suraj from Leh Helios. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hello, hello everyone. I am Suraj from Leh Helios. I'm actually an entrepreneur. See, I basically thank everyone for this opportunity for me to be a part of this, and I believe it is a great help for all entrepreneurs who can participate on this kind of FDP programs. And I believe see, for us the information is everything, and this section, the entire 5 day, have given me a lot of information, and I hope the presenter has informed a lot of information, and this entire section will take us forward. Thank you so much for the section. It was a great experience.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Participants, please come forward.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes, I can hear.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Renu, faculty from College of Engineering, Trikaripur. This 5-day FTP was a very fruitful session from Mr. Prasant Kumar sir. He has presented all the topics related to electric vehicle design in every intricacies in a very simple and understandable way. So as far as I had developed this interest in electric vehicle only recently when some of the students took up the topic and project. So all the knowledge I had was from reading a few IEEE papers, but this session helped me to get a practical perspective of how the various design aspects of electric vehicle, the architecture, the thermal designing part, the regenerative braking. So he opened a very large area for research. So I'm very thankful to Prashant Kumar sir, and he presented it in a very beautiful way with all the videos, animation videos, and the real videos. It was very helpful to understand how these elements are arranged inside an electric vehicle. So thank you, sir, and thank you, College of Engineering, Kirangur, and the team, Aparna Miss and Prasida Miss, for arranging this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Renu.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Okay. Myself, good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Sudhish, I am from College of Engineering, Talasheri. First of all, what I want to say is that the last 5 days, it is gone like anything. So I was in front of the session for the last 5 days. The session was really nice, superb, amazing. Nothing more to say. The speaker is really Prashant Kumar sir. He is really knowledgeable in this field. So the entire session was nice, very good, and he answered in a very good manner. He cleared all the queries in a very good manner. So it was really useful for us. Thank you, sir. And in this occasion, I would like to thank the organizers of this FDP, Aparna madam, and Prasida madam, and all other members. I might not be knowing all the other names, so I take this opportunity to thank all the organizers and the key speaker Prashant sir. Have a nice time. Thank you, sir. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Hello.
Yes, Abhijit.
I am Abhijit Kannan. I am a student at College of Engineering, Kirangur. First of all, thank you for inviting me to this session, even though this was an FTP. The session was very informative. Your explanation was very clear and easy to understand. I have done a couple of courses on electric vehicles, and 90% of whatever you thought in this session wasn't in there. So I was quite exposed to newer things because of this session. Thank you, sir, for taking such a wonderful section.
Thank you, Abhijit.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. So I guess there are no more feedbacks now. Next, we'll move on to the validatory function. Over to Prasida Miss.
Good afternoon, all. So now we have come to the end of 5-day online FTP on electric vehicles. So now I would like to invite our beloved HOD, Dr. Indu ma'am, to say a few words about the program. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Prasida. Good afternoon, one and all. So we come to an end of our 5-day FDP on electric vehicles with a lot of teaching and learning experiences for the faculties or for the participants. So instead of the regular FDPs, where eminent professors from IITs or NITs from other reputed institutions were invited to speak on a specified theme, our 5-day program is entirely handled by a single resource person, Prashant Kumar sir, who is one of the best in the field of electric vehicles. So no words for Prashant Kumar sir, and already our participants had given feedback for his sessions. So thank you so much, sir, for associating with our department again and again. Now, learning to teach new technologies is a lifelong process involving continual improvement. So we have participants who were faculty members, researchers, and entrepreneurs from institutions across the state and a few from outside our state. Most of the participants attended the sessions, showed great enthusiasm throughout the week, even though we have the Maundy Thursday and the Good Friday in between. Hats off to the passion and sincerity of all the participants. Our principal, Dr. K.G. Vishwanathan sir, then other HODs of various departments and our TechUp team have given proper guidance to materialize this FDP. And as we all know, when the faculty members are ready, they can make those students ready. So I hope our FDP will help to enrich the concepts of electric vehicles in our students. So we are planning to organize a skill development program for the students during May 2021. So if you are really interested in this FDP, you can motivate your students to participate in that program too. Now I take this opportunity to congratulate my dearest fellows, Prasita, Abarna and Adil, for their high level of individual and group effort for organizing this FDP in an effective manner. Thank you all the participants for associating with our department, and looking forward to meet you all in our future endeavors. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, I would like to express my sincere thanks to Mr. Prashant sir for sharing his expertise with us. We are highly indebted to you, sir. I must say that you are a true professional in all sense. I hope participants will be able to make good use of the knowledge that they gain through these sessions in the near future also. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Now, I would like to express my gratitude to all the participants. Many of you had interacted and expressed their queries. Thanks to you for making the sessions interactive. Now, I would like to thank our respected principal, Dr. K.G. Vishwanathan sir, for giving us a chance to organize this FDP. Next, I would like to thank our beloved HOD, Indu ma'am, for the full support and guidance for arranging this program. Finally, I would like to thank all my colleagues and my co-coordinators for making this program a grand success. Participants, before we wind up, I would like to inform e-certificates will be provided within 2 weeks. So all of you are requested to continue in the WhatsApp group until you receive the certificates. Once again, I thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss. So this is the end of the FDP. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.